What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be ranking all 5 Evil Dead movies from the worst to the best. So I've just reacted to the first 4 Evil Dead movies all on my channel. I did the first one back like 2 years ago, but I did the Evil Dead 2, I did Army of Darkness, and I did Evil Dead 2013 just these past few weeks. Evil Dead 2013 has not released yet on this channel, but it is on my Patreon currently. And of course, I saw Evil Dead Rise in theaters. So if you want to hear my ranking for each and every one of them, let's get to it. In last place, unfortunately, is going to be The Evil Dead from 1981, directed by, of course, Sam Raimi. I don't want to have to put this here because I know how popular this movie is. I know how loved it is. But when I look at all of these movies, I have to put this one in the last place. I have to. And there's a couple of reasons for it. So, first of all, after watching Evil Dead 2, I do feel like Evil Dead 2 basically just does what this one does, but better. So I don't really know if I have much of a reason to ever go back to Evil Dead 1 because of that. It's also probably the one that has the most mix of comedy and actual horror, because when you go to Evil Dead 2, it's like full-on comedy. Same with Army of Darkness, and then the Evil Dead 2013 remake as well as Evil Dead Rise is way more serious. But this first Evil Dead movie, this is the only one that really does do pretty much an equal mix of horror and comedy. And I think in a way that's a good thing, so it definitely at least gives it some sort of uniqueness. But in another way, the balance between the comedy and the horror just kind of makes each of them not really feel as fleshed out. Like, the horror aspects don't really feel present because every now and then there's a lot of just things that are just straight up hilarious. I think when it comes to the funny moments of this film, it does get a little bit repetitive, and we'll talk about that with Evil Dead 2 as well. Like, some of it is really funny, some of the wackiness is really interesting, but it does start to feel a little repetitive after a certain amount of time. So that's the reason why it's in last place. But I absolutely love Sam Raimi's directing style in this movie. I love Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams. This is a great film for that. But just when it comes to a lot of other aspects of it, it does hold it back quite a bit, and it just makes it my least favorite Evil Dead film. But in no way do I think it's a terrible movie or anything like that. In number 4 spot is going to be Evil Dead 2 from 1987, which I pretty much have the same negative for this as I do for the first Evil Dead film, and that's just the fact that some of the humor does get kind of repetitive. It's funny for a little bit of the film, but then it starts to get to a point where I'm like, all right, they're just throwing everything at the wall, and some of it's working, some of it's not though. It basically is the first Evil Dead film, but just on complete steroids. Like, the comedy is a lot funnier, the practical effects are a lot better, and they use a lot more of it. And I mean, Ash is just on another level of insane in this movie, and it's very entertaining. I will say it's very, very entertaining. But just like the first one, yeah, there's certain scenes that just don't really land for me. I love a lot of the scenes though, like the one where he's chopping off his hand after, his hand's coming at him, and he's to chop it off with the chainsaw, and the whole usage of the chainsaw in this was really cool, especially when he gets it attached to his hand. That's very iconic, very cool. The quotes in this movie are pretty great as well. And I think this is where Bruce Campbell is probably at his best in this franchise. I haven't seen Ash vs. Evil Dead yet, so I can't speak on that series, but at least for the movies, I think this is probably where he's at its best. No, actually, I could probably say he's at its best in the next spot, which we might as well get to now. So in the number 3 spot, of course, Army of Darkness from 1992. So the medieval setting, I think, was really cool. It's a really nice change. I think that's one of the issues I had with Evil Dead 2. It was the same setting as the first one, the exact same setting, literally the same cabin. So it obviously wasn't as unique and different, but Army of Darkness literally takes him through time into the medieval times in a castle. It's so wacky, way more wacky than the first two, even though the first two are very wacky. This one just goes insane with the camp. And I think it works a lot better than the first two, if I'm going to be completely honest, because they really do go there. They go far with it. They don't hold back in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of the monsters are really cool looking in this. I think one of my favorite scenes is when Ash is fighting one of the, what do you call them, Deadites or something? He's fighting one of them down in the little pit that they threw him in the beginning of the film. I thought that scene was awesome. And his usage of the chainsaw and shotgun in this movie is really great. You have a lot of great quotes, like when he's talking to all the medieval folk people, I don't know what you call them, the civilians of this castle, and he's telling them about his boomstick. Like, that type of stuff was really funny. I think a lot of this movie worked for me more than the other ones. You have that amazing battle at the end there. Really cool stuff in this movie, honestly. It's one of those ones that it has a lot of the 80s, 90s cheese to it, but it works very well. I especially like the whole fish out of water nature of it because obviously Ash is in the past, and those type of movies are always pretty interesting. In number 2 spot is actually going to be Evil Dead Rise, the newest film in this franchise, and I really did enjoy this. I thought it was a knock out of the park. It was exactly what I was hoping it was going to be. I think there was only a couple things holding it back when it comes to some of the characters, but for the most part, it really was amazing. It had amazing practical effects with the gore. It was probably the second goriest in the franchise. I don't think it was the goriest, but it was close to being the goriest. It had a lot of intense, scary sequences that made my whole theater just absolutely crawl up into their own skin. I love the apartment complex setting in this film. It's very different than having, the setting mainly being cabins for the other films in this franchise. The directing style still being similar to Sam Raimi. I absolutely love how most of these movies have been keeping up with that. They haven't really stopped making their films shot in a similar way. And I loved the family dynamic between the characters in this film. Even if some of the characters I didn't absolutely love, I think the family elements of it are very different than what we've seen before because it's usually just a bunch of kids or, obviously in Army of Darkness's case, it's really just Ash and then a couple other people from the castle. But this one is the first time we saw a family being the main focus in the story and seeing how they deal with the situation. And it does make it a lot more heartbreaking because obviously if your own mother is the one who's possessed, it definitely changes the situation quite a bit because it's not as easy to kill them like it would be if it was just some random person. But the best Evil Dead film has to go to Evil Dead 2013. Of course, my reaction, you guys haven't seen it yet. It's not up on YouTube yet, but when it goes up, I think it's one of my favorite reactions ever, at least for like the last half of the film. The first like 30 or so minutes, it's okay, but it really picks up, and when it gets crazy, it is insane. The gore is out of this world with how good it looks, and it's disgusting, definitely, but it definitely works for me. And I think the best thing about this movie is the cinematography. There are so many and fantastic shots in this movie that just look outstanding. Like they know exactly where to position the camera in a lot of these scenes to just make you just be in love with what's going on. And there's a lot of that in this movie. Mia automatically established herself as one of my favorite final girls ever. She is incredible in this movie, especially the last 15 minutes. She is insane. And I love her character even just leading up to that point because she has this interesting story where she's trying to overcome drug abuse. And so when she gets possessed, the other characters just assume that it's the withdrawals causing her to be this way. But no, we know it's not just the withdrawals. It's also the fact that she's possessed. So I love how that all works out. The only negative about this movie, the only thing that holds it back from being like a 10 out of 10 is the acting. Not all of the acting. Some of the characters are fine, but some of them, it's just, oh my god, especially in the beginning of the movie. Like when it gets to the really scary stuff, the really intense scenes, I think the acting's pretty good and that's where it matters most. But in like the calm moments where characters are just chatting with each other, a lot of it just, I didn't like the acting. I don't know, most of these actors I've never seen before and I just didn't think they were that good. The Mia actress, she was great though, I don't know her name, but she was fantastic. And yeah, this is by far my favorite in the franchise because of everything I just said. I could definitely rewatch this many times because holy shit, that last 40 minutes is just bonkers and I loved it. So let me know your guys' lists in the comments section below. I would love to see what you guys rank these movies. I think my list is definitely very unpopular. I don't think many people are going to put Evil Dead 2 and the first Evil Dead in the bottom spots, but that's just my opinion. So give me your own opinion. I think all these movies definitely, I could see people putting them at the #1 spot. I will see you on my next one. Peace out.